Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Day 3 of Disability Awareness Week 2022. My name is Peter Santiago, and I'm the Associate Director of Accessibility Services here at KCC. And we're the office on campus that supports students with disabilities. So I am joining you today from land that was stolen and rightfully belongs to the Lenape people. It is my sincere hope that as a society, we can find some way to make amends to the generations of indigenous people that have been forcibly removed from their land and worse. For disability awareness this year, we've chosen to celebrate the whole person and the myriad of intersecting identities that are often overlooked in people with disabilities. We have panels, talks, and there was a screening that happened that all were presented by KCC faculty, staff, and we have some students on the way as well. We'll also have an off-campus speaker, talking to us about intersectionality and disability, the lens of racism, transphobia, homophobia, and other marginalized identities and disability. And that will be tomorrow. Our hope is that this week's events will help to shape your perspective towards a strengths-based and holistic understanding of the identities of people with disabilities. So our second event of today is presented by one of our faculty, Bruno Guli, who will inform us about the philosophy of ableism. So Bruno, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Peter. Thanks for inviting me. And I will start by saying that precisely, I will share my screen a few times. I know that I had to share, unshare, and then share again. But I will start on a very personal note, and as I was telling Peter a moment ago, I hope I won't get emotional, because this happens often when I speak about Pino, my brother, 4 years younger than me, and my twin brother, who died tragically five years ago. And so, but that was in addition to seeing this as a celebration of his life. When he died, I told my family, the rest of my family, that our life from that point on would have to be a celebration precisely of Pino's life. And I will connect immediately to the last point that came up at the wonderful previous presentation by Faith Fogelman, and the question that came up about the position and the experience of siblings or other relatives, friends around someone who has disabilities. And of course, I will then also look at the problematic nature of this word disability, which is precisely an umbrella term that very often hides more than, and we know that there is, then I'll be speaking more about this, but the question of visible, invisible disabilities, mental and or physical disabilities, and the very severe disabilities whereby a person is completely dependent. Dependent is another concept that I'll go back to throughout life, from birth to death, and in this case, this they present particular challenges of their own, and that was the case of my brother Pino precisely. Let me share the screen. The first time I can't. Apparently, I can't share the screen, Peter.
Go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Oh, now I can. So let me start with this, and then I will share this again. How do I do that? Sorry. Oh, okay, share. So this is, well, the philosophy of ableism, disability. And I want to start with some preliminaries. I will go to the question of, siblings, let's put it this way, in a moment. But first of all, I really like the...
Bruno, it looks like you're sharing a Word document. Did you want to share a PowerPoint?
No, just a Word document. Okay, is that okay? Can you see that as well? Can you?
Maybe we
Not
want to
really?
zoom in just a little bit for folks that might
Should
be
I do that? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I
no
didn't do
problem.
that. Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Sure. Is it better?
Yeah, I
No?
think that's good. Thank you.
Okay, you can see. Okay. And yes, okay. First of all, I very much like the idea of the whole person, which is right the title for this series of events. And this is something that I have often thought about in terms also of philosophy. So it's important to really appreciate that rather than, you know, fall into so many errors and fallacies of precisely, you know, that come with our tendency to stigmatize that is part of the very troubling logic of normalization. I know that later this afternoon, some of the things that will come up will be, as Peter, you were saying earlier, relating to language, the question of words such as normal and so on and so forth, to which I will go back as well. So I maybe start by reading the abstract, and then I have gathered more material than I can possibly present, because I had the abstract, then I want to go through, you know, some conceptual and terminological points, and then read a paper. I mean, I don't want to bore or tire you, but which is a paper which would be actually a shortened and revised version of the last chapter of a book I wrote in 2010, in which I deal precisely with the question of disability and dependency. But if there is time, I will also show a video that actually I put a post on Facebook yesterday about this, and a colleague from BMCC told me that there was this video that you know, that I had never shown even to my classes. I usually have a class on disability as well, but maybe I will do that now today if we had time. So I say in the abstract, based on my personal experience and precisely on the final chapter of the book that I mentioned, I will address the question of the place of disability in the ableist society. I will review aspects of the work by Eva Feder-Kittay. She has a book that I have used a lot, that I still use a lot. It's called Love's Labor, L-A-B-O-R, Essays on Women, Equality and Dependency, which is really what, I mean, when I encountered this book, when I was doing my research, the research for my book in around 2010, then I was really, you know, struck by the fact that there was this particular, you know, attention analysis of the question of disability, which was what, you know, I had always been troubled by the place of the disability in not only in the ableist society, but in the ableist philosophy. Since I started studying philosophy when I was about 15, 16 years old in Italy, I was always troubled by that. You know, the emphasis in philosophy on whatever they call the rational, you know, individual of, as Kittay says, ultimately man as the measure, which, you know, by, I want to anticipate, I hope that I don't create too much confusion, but I believe that we had to displace this idea of, you know, the rational, independent individual, independent, separate from all the rest, right, as the measure of everything. I hope, am I making sense so far? Can you all follow me? Right, and displace that with the idea of, although that may also be problematic, that the idea that disability should become the measure of society instead. Okay, so in any case, I will use these, you know, elements from Kittay's book, as well as from Elizabeth Dimut Bubeck, who wrote on care, gender, and justice. So And again, by way of anticipation, and I may be repeating some of these things in the course of my presentation, I will consider, as Kitei does. I mean, Kitei says dependency, she focuses on dependency, and she says that dependency is the inescapable fact of the human condition, which is, I believe, something that no one could deny, and it's perhaps, as far as I know, the best conceptualization of precisely the human condition, because everybody is dependent at one point in their life, sooner or later, and actually always say sooner rather than later, because as Kitei, I'm following Kitei here, newborns are completely dependent. And then people in a very old age, even when they are lucky to get there in a relatively healthy state, there is the frailty that comes with old age anyway. So dependency again, or again in situations of serious illnesses, I don't know, a stroke, heart attack, other similar, an accident. And then, of course, we have the very important situation of someone who has a severe disability from birth. In this case, dependency will be there from start to end. And to again link to something that has been said previously in the previous session, I mean, the dependency of the one is the dependency of the other, right? We are all dependent on one another. There is, if anything, interdependence, but there is never independence. And this is another aspect of my work also, which, has been, and is very important to me, is the idea of, trying to deconstruct this this illusion, this myth of the independent and sovereign individual. No one is independent and sovereign. We are all mutually dependent, and so even in the situation of care, right? I mean, I speak a lot about care, following again Kitei, Ubek, and others. There is this idea that, it's not only the person who needs care who is dependent, but even the caretaker becomes dependent too. And this links to the question that we were speaking earlier of, the person with disability in his or her relation to the family, to the siblings and the people around them. There is always this sort of interdependence. And if I may, because I use that in my work, and I spoke about this at a talk I gave in the history, my department, last week. There is this wonderful concept in Southern African philosophy that is called Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U, which means it's a word for humanity, but we usually render that as I am because we are, right? A person is because of and through the other people. And I believe that in our society, societies globally, we should move toward that type of thinking, the thinking of interdependence based on on precisely as Kitei says, dependency as the inescapable facts of the human condition. So I hope that so far, that what I said makes sense. I mentioned here the question of man as the measure of humanity that should be instead superseded by something different. Actually, and I like what the previous speaker said, Faith, right, about identity. I completely agree with that. I also perhaps would like to add that identity is always difference, and difference is identity. Philosophically, there is much confusion about that, as there is confusion today that we live in the age of the politics of identity, but identity is difference. And I will go back to that, and also, you know, when I read my, there is time, my essay. But if I may, I'd like to now, first of all, read I say that the book that I wrote in 2010 is dedicated precisely to Pino, to my brother, just like my latest book that I wrote after he died 2 years ago, dedicated to him as well. But this one, the dedication is for Pino who guides. And I like to make a reference to, you know, the other day, Monday, there was this point being made as well. I thought it was Margot making the point.
Yeah,
that,
I was there.
Right. I mean that, you know, people with disabilities may very well be leaders, for whatever, you know, this problematic term is. But that's what I mean. I mean, for me, for the other members of my family, you know, Pino has always been, I say has always been, because even now that he's dead, the situation remains the same. A guide on the existential plane, on the moral plane, and that is something that, you know, should become more acknowledged. The fact that, you know, people precisely with disabilities do, you know, perform this function. I mean, and I believe at one point Faith previously also said that there is this kind of self-regulatory, no, if I remember correctly, situation, right? That but the regulatory aspect of this goes beyond the person. I mean, the whole person is precisely something that reaches into the community, whether the community is the family or even the community more, you know, at large. So in any case, that's what. And if I may, I will now stop this share, and I want to, in keeping with you know, what I was saying, the celebration of Pino's life, I want to show a few pictures of Pino. Sorry, bear with me, because I mean, I'm not okay. Let me try to share this again. Okay. Share. How do I do? Oh, okay. So these are some pictures. This is. Can you see this? I can make it bigger, apparently.
We can see your screen. The images are just small.
Sorry.
If you want to show all of them, maybe open all of them at the same time. They'll open in a different window, and you can cycle through them.
Okay. Okay, maybe open with Microsoft. You see that?
It's opening, I think. Well, you'll have to reshare your screen for the Microsoft.
For the other window, yeah.
I see. Okay, so. You see?
Yes.
Okay, so this
Beautiful.
is Pino with my twin brother many years ago. I mean, speaking about the question of siblings and how, you know, it becomes, and also the question of how then a disability is the disability of all in the family, in the community, right? I mean, that is absolutely true. And then just a few other pictures. This is Pino with my brother. And I don't know which one is me and which one is my twin brother, but in any case, Pino, very happy, because that's what I want to also say. I mean, although he had this very severe disability that and the cause of it was I believe trauma delivery, that's the way we say, right? I mean an accident at birth, he had a wonderful life in many ways, in many senses, although then also difficult moments, of course, and unfortunately a tragic death. But he came to New York with us often. He used to spend maybe 6 months with us and then go back to Italy, of course, always. So in any case, very, very happy and very creative. This is Pino again with my brother and myself. Very inventive. This is Pino with his school at one point. He was a performer as well, to go back to something we saw Monday as well, you know, singing, right? The importance of singing. I said that last time, that he was, you know, always, he always enjoyed to perform, to sing in particular, and so was very, very creative. This is me and Pino. Many years ago, again, me and Pino. And this is the last picture that we have of Pino before he died. And actually, he was blind at this point because, you know, at one point he started losing his sight and became blind in a relatively, you know, quick manner. And then as I was doing my research also and reading more about the question of disability, I realized how people with severe disabilities of this type, then they are more likely to develop medical conditions that other people may perhaps develop later, you know, or with perhaps old age. But although he was blind, this is 2 months before he died. He died 5 years ago. This on April 14th will be 5 years, but he doesn't look that way. And I mean, this is in any case. So, but I stop the share now, and I hope that you know, I'm making sense, and I don't want this to be too personal, but it is at the same time, as I said. To me, by the way, philosophy is never only an academic thing. As I always tell my students, it is a journey, and so the philosophical, I would say, is personal, just like in you know, feminism. At one point, they said the political is personal. The political is personal, the philosophical too. So, but I'd like to perhaps now, unless there are questions already and comments, I don't want to bore you, you know, and so otherwise I can read from the paper, the essay that I have, you know, drafted for today. But any comments, any questions so far?
Well, Bruno, I have to say that that I think you're proving precisely your point, right? That there's that interdependence, and I think we're seeing how interdependent you and your brothers are. And
yes,
it's wonderful to see. So thank you for sharing so much.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Peter. Yes. Okay. So then let me perhaps get to the more I don't know, philosophical part of this. I mean, I had these concepts that I have mentioned already: dependency, the independent individual, labor ischea, and the idea by Bubeck, the other person I mentioned, the scholar that I also use. I mean, I use many others in my book. She says that we had to make this transition from persona carens, the caring person, I'm sorry, from homo economicus, economic man, to persona carens, the caring person, where care and the modality of care becomes really the most, you know, fundamental modality in our, you know, shared lives in our communities. And then this other concept that I mentioned here, you see the screen, right? In my book, I actually write disability should become the measure of humanity, disability, DIS, and then ability. But then, you know, I realized as I was rewriting this, that it's better to change it to, this is an expression which is used, I'm not the only one using it, this ability, this ability. And the concept this in philosophy is very important because it is precisely what individuates something as something, right? Any this is different from any other this. So, and in a sense, this goes back to perhaps the idea of identity that also Faith was speaking about. But this is identical with itself, so to speak, precisely because it is different from all other things. I spoke about, you know, the moment when I started studying philosophy and the trouble I had with that. And then, you know, I don't know how much time I have. I can read, perhaps. Yes, can I?
We still have over 30 minutes. So you still have time.
And I haven't bored you or tired you? No, can I continue? Okay.
No, we're not bored.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So here, what I try to do is think, right, care, dependency, and disability in light of the critique of productivity and sovereignty. I don't want to go too you know, in depth into that, but at the same time confirm the importance of such a critique from the point of view of the centrality of care, right? Care is really central, and the inescapability of the condition of dependency, and dependency as the inescapable fact, as Kitei says, of the human condition, which includes what is problematically called disability. So the fact that care has been historically seen as the work of women, because there is also, of course, I mean, I had to, you know, say this relation, this important relation between questions of, you know, disability as disability studies, you know, critical disability theory, for example, says, and gender, and many other, you know, aspects of, you know, what our social life, social existence is. So, in any case, you know, I maybe will go back to this. I spoke about the question of a persona carens, the caring person, and then I go to Kitei. Eva Feder Kitei says that some forms of caring, such as child care, require a talent as precious as an artist, right? Indeed, this might be true of most or all forms of caring. Kitei focuses on the labor of dependency and care, which becomes most visible in one of the most invisible existential realities, the reality of a disability, particularly of a severe mental and physical disability. Kitei sees dependency, I repeat this, I'm sorry, as the inescapable facts of the human condition, but it is so important that it is, you know, worth repeating. Care is socially necessary because of the inescapability of dependency. Disability is one of the names given to the facts of a dependency. Although degrees of dependency are always present in everybody's life, dependency is precisely most conspicuous, as I said at the beginning of life, in situations of illness, in frail old age, and in precisely in a more specific manner in dependency is present in situations of disability. In Law's labor, Kitei formulates the concept of dependency work, as the work of caring for, I'm quoting here, for those who are inevitably dependent. She offers a dependency critique of equality, since the latter concept masks inequitable dependencies, those of infancy and childhood, old age, illness, and disability, and it remains elusive for women. The critique of the myth of the independent individual, of independence, and of society as an association of equals, shows dependency as precisely an inescapable fact of human life, and care as the adequate response to the fact of dependency. There is care because there is dependency. And again, I want to insist on this because, I mean, we live in societies in which there is very little of that, very little care, right? And the myth of the individual independent and sovereign individual seems to be the most important aspect. I mean, like success, competition, and so on and so forth, right? So generally speaking, the traditional concept of equality proves incapable of becoming common, for it entails the idea precisely of man as the measure of humanity. It is then equalities in the plural, if anything, that might reach into the common, what is common to all, with a view to the fundamental aspect of a difference. We are different from another, and this is, I'm quoting Kitei here again, we are different from another and we are equal to another. Indeed, difference is a relative category. Kitei gives an example that might be useful to quote. She says, for instance, right, this is a great example, I believe, that I quote in my book, again from Kitei. For instance, to insist that difference is the property of a deaf child in a class of hearing children, and so the deaf child must accommodate herself to her hearing peers, is to ignore the fact that the hearing child is also different from the deaf child. Neither hearing nor deafness is inherently a difference. Instead, the difference is in the relation these children bear to one another. And maybe I pause here because, again, I don't want to be too long. I mean, there would be so much to say, but this is a very important point that can reorient the trajectories of our societies, of our lives at the individual and collective level, right? I mean, we think about someone as being different, but we are different from this person too. I mean, everything is different. And this is what I mean when I say that identity and difference are exactly the same thing, right? Maybe I pause and see if there are questions, comments, because like I said, I mean, I also wanted to show a video which I can put in the chat, actually, if that's easier, a video about the question of disability and gender and identity with the philosopher Judith Butler. From a movie called Examined Life. I don't know if anyone has seen that, so maybe I'll do that. But any question, any comments so far? Because so we can have a more interactive situation as well. And again, I hope that I made sense so far, but you know, there will be so much more to say. Yes.
Hey, you're making perfect sense.
Okay, thank you.
I'm following very well. There was something that you mentioned earlier about
yes.
and I think it was akin to like the contrast between caring and productivity. Can you say a little bit more about that? I think that's important in today's society.
Absolutely.
We value productivity almost above all else.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, and this is something that is central in my book. The last chapter of this book is this is the book. If you see, Earthly Plenitudes, a study on sovereignty and labor, LABOR, in which I precisely present a critique of productivity, because there is much confusion about what, you know, production is, the necessary making of things that we need or we desire, you know, of and the usefulness of them, and productivity, which becomes, let's say, an ideology within the capitalist system, whereby, you know, we produce just for the sake of profit and not for the sake of what's useful in our communities, in our lives. And this is so important, you know, because and links to the question of care. In what sense? I mean, that very, and this also links to the question of gender and feminism. I mean, most working activities, most activities that we engage in are usually, considered to be unproductive, right? Because they precisely do not produce capital, do not reproduce capital, do not produce, create profits. But they are activities without which our communities, societies could not flourish. Whatever is called usually in quote women's work. I'm teaching this tonight also because we have a week on feminism and so on. I mean, women's work, the work of care, the labor of care, this is fundamental, right? In order to have a functioning, let alone, flourishing and thriving society. But it is usually understood as, it's taken for granted. Someone will do that. And who? The women in the house, in the community, because, the ideology and the fiction of this is that it is more natural, right, for women to, which is a complete, it's an absurdity altogether. But so this work of care should become the structure of our social, I mean, if we want to reinvent society, a juster society, then we should place care as its fundamental structure, rather than this strange idea of productivity that we had to produce, again, for what? Just to increase and to, capital and to make profit. I don't know if that's, there could be much more to say, but I don't know if I address, Peter, your very important question. So
Yes, definitely. And I can see how this idea of productivity feeds into the ableist ideas of society, right?
Yes.
So if a person is unable to produce in the way that they expect, then thus we have these ideas that the person is lesser, or we have these ideas of ableism where if they're not capable of doing these specific things that society looks for, then
yes,
maybe they're not worthy of our time and it's unproductive.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, the title of the final chapter of my book is Sovereign, Productive, and Efficient: the Place of Disability in the Ableist Society. And what you say, Peter, is, I completely agree. And the fact that even in situations of severe mental and physical disability, again, I mean, if we measure that, precisely the question of the measure, what is the measure of things, right? Then we say, well, there is no, efficiency, no productivity at all. But, to say something which is not trivial, it's actually essential. What we have in those situations is precisely love, for example. It is joy, happiness. Again, if I may go back to my experience as Pino's brother and my other siblings too. I mean, we always realized that what we gave, we were able to give Pino was much less than what he gave us, and that not only us in the family, everybody who met Pino loved. I mean, he was, he had so many people that he knew, and that he would go out with, other people in, our hometown in Calabria, to sing, to do things, various things. But what I mean to say, he gave us much more. And actually, those who were not able to give as much as they should have, it was we ourselves. I mean, not because of not wanting to, but this always remains with me, that as much as we tried, we were not really able to give him all he perhaps needed. We tried, and but again, what he gave us, and this is, I mean, I'm using my personal example, but in societies at large, we had to realize that. I mean, and also think about the fact that in the past, and not perhaps long ago, and maybe this still goes on in some, or maybe everywhere in the world, right? I mean, people with disabilities, with all the confusion that there is around these things, like your comment earlier about the R word that so often people, you know, still use. And I'm someone who usually tell people, I usually tell people when they do that, maybe because they are unaware of the importance of this. I had to say that in a biomedical ethics book that I used, years ago, a textbook. There was this, they still retain the use of that word. But to go back to what I was saying is that, basically, we should understand in societies that disabilities or whatever is understood as not normal, right, or the abnormal, should actually become a central moment of our societies, because it will structure our societies in a completely different way. I mean, in the past, people were institutionalized and, left in, in those places, forgotten. And unfortunately, this still goes on today. And I had to say, give credit, in my personal experience, to my parents that, when Pino was born, they made precisely a very important rational decision to leave this aspect of their life and Pino's life and our life in the most, open, transparent, loving way. And I'm speaking about, half a century ago in a backward place of the world, right, like southern Italy, Calabria, I mean, it was really because the tendency back then and back there was precisely to hide this, as if that were something to hide, a kind of shame or whatever. And so, but I see in my experience that there is an alternative. There is another possible and much, more meaningful and beautiful approach, which is that of care again and love, and with all the difficulties of this, because it's no one can say that this is an easy thing. No, it is not, because as Kitei also says in her book, at one point, it's a very delicate thing, because the relationship between the person who needs care and the caretaker is, by definition, is an uneven relation. And if I may then, explain also more about what I think philosophically about care, I say, well, care is power. And usually when we think about power, we think of political power as domination, authority, and so on and so forth. But there are two ideas of power, to say the least. One is precisely power over, and the other is power to. So in a relationship of care, this unevenness, which is there, because, right, I can do things for someone who can do those things by themselves, but I don't have power over, right? I mean, because otherwise that would be abusive. That would be a relation of domination. It's not power over, but it is power to do something, because power fundamentally is this. Power is the capacity that we had to do something, the ability, problematic as that is. And again, I think it was mentioned before, our abilities are always relative. I mean, we have competence in one thing and maybe not in others, and so on and so forth. But it is this moment of care that displaces also the political, traditionally, political concept of power as authority, domination, and so on and so forth, becomes something completely different, becomes something that, if I may link to my initial remark, is very much in line with the Ubuntu concept. I am because we are. right? Without the we, there wouldn't be any I, fundamentally. And this is, not only in particular situations of care, in all caring relations, and we see that, that whatever we call the self is made of the others. I mean, the example I always make when I teach also these things is, a mother is a mother because of her children, and for no other reason. It is the others that make me who I am, right? So again, but care, yes, should become the most basic trait in our existences, in our societies, and yeah. Sorry, any other
No,
comment?
I totally agree with you. And I think there are different levels of care, right? We can care for one another without meeting each other's physical needs, but just caring for one another. And I think that definitely is of supreme importance for all of us.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, any other comment or question? Otherwise, I can read more, or I should put maybe this, what do you say, the thing that I mentioned, the video in the chat, if people want to see it.
Yeah, sure. I'm interested to see it.
Yeah, it's, we wouldn't have time now because it's 14 minutes long, but otherwise it would be nice to also perhaps watch it together. But let me go back to chat. Okay. So any other question, comment, or do you want me to continue perhaps reading?
I'll read one of the comments from the chat, and maybe that'll.
Oh, okay. Sorry that I missed all that. Yeah.
No problem. No problem. So Margot said, I like how your experiences in Italy inform your disability philosophy, Bruno. Immigrant experience is so valuable. I feel empowered when I help others too. We had Stephanie that said, I agree. At Margot Cole, I worked at a location where this was frowned upon. So I started working, then I started working a job coaching to give others opportunities. So I think people are very much talking about the idea of them caring for others and how they benefit from it as well. So can you maybe speak more about that, how caring for others leads to mutual benefits?
Yes. Well, absolutely. And what I was saying that what the person, the others, we care for if we can. And again, it's not only the situation of disability in its specificity, but newborns, the elderly. Again, what we get from that is so much, and not only in terms of because it's not that everything is it shouldn't be idealized as or romanticized as always a beautiful thing. I mean, there are problems, right? But we get an understanding of the other, an understanding of ourselves, in addition to the affects, the emotions that very often we overlook in our societies, where we always get to run, for something and so on and so forth. But it is this that it makes us understand what what it is to be perhaps human, right? I mean, and I don't see the human being as better or worse than any other living being or even non-living being. That's not the issue. The issue is our specificity. What is it really that makes us who we are? I mean, what gives us the proper character as being human? I mean, care, the need for care, the need to give care. Care is you know, precisely, and there are, you know, I can't give all the references to this, but there is a fable also. But but in any case, Kea is the time between birth and death. There is always need for Kea. So I mean, if we, you know, don't pay attention to that, as we often, you know, as it often happens in our societies, then we miss a lot. We miss our humanity. So Kea is another word for power, again, power to do things, power to improve perhaps things, and another word for humanity. That's what I think. And again, you know, I want to perhaps remark on that too, because in the uneven relation that we have between, you know, a situation in which someone needs care, is taken care of, and another person provides that care, there may be, like I said before, difficulties, but these are the difficulties of our human experience, I believe. So that is the challenge, but it is a challenge that must be attended to, because it makes us, I don't know, we can put it that way, better people, perhaps. It is also an ethical question of that type, right? I mean, the relationship between whatever we call the self and the other, without understanding that the self is already the other and the other is another self. So, there is this coming to, you know, the awareness that we are not precisely alone, that again, the independent individual is a fiction, doesn't exist, right? And what passes as the independent individual is usually an individual who appears as independent on the basis of the work of other people. One example, I mean, we'll start, I mean, you know, in the, say, typical traditional patriarchal family, who appears as the independent and sovereign individual? The husband and father. But without the work of all others in the family and in the community, this independence would collapse immediately, because there is no independence whatsoever. And everything is established on the basis of the exploitation of the work of others. And yes, no man is an island. I usually don't look at the chat, but I see that, yes, Deborah, I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. That's another way of putting this. Yes, yes. And this is important because it tells us also that it's not a question of philosophical abstractions and so on, but it is, let's say, a philosophy of everyday life, of very concrete situations. That's right. But it is interesting that the winning ideology is that which the liberal, ultimately neoliberal ideology, the capitalist ideology, tells us that precisely we should care only for about ourselves and not care for any other thing. I mean, let alone other people, but say the environment. So when we start caring, then we start acting differently with, again, the environment, with the others, and with ourselves as an instance of otherness, as an instance of a difference as well, right? So, and that's basically the idea, because you know, the idea of the individual who can allow to be in live in as if he or she, usually he, were an island, right? I mean, becomes, you know, a problem for society as a whole. It creates these social pathologies that we you know, see all the time, right? And that translate into situations of oppression, domination, exploitation, discrimination, stigmatization, and so on and so forth. So all these must stop. I would say, can we think of a different, better world? Why not? It's all a question of relations of power, right? So these power relations can be changed, can be radically changed, right? And we can move toward a better, juster world. I mean, it's not impossible. And again, the experience of disability tells us that, again, in my life, in my experience, I had to say that most of the things that I learned by relating to my brother, to Pino, precisely. I mean, and that was the trouble. Of course, I love philosophy and studying and reading in general. And but this is the point that you see. What's really important in our life? What is the dearest thing, the dearest moment in our life, if not this striving to love and care for others? Because again, I say striving because I'm not thinking about the romantic thing of love, someone falls in love and so on. No, I mean it is a constant task that we had to undertake. And I actually, I can mention at this point a book written by a friend of mine, which is called The Communism of Love, right? Where he says, Richard Gilman Opalski, we are actually now writing something together. He highlights the fact that love is action, activity. And when we look at that way, then we see how central within that is the inescapable modality of care. Inescapable because inescapable is also the fact of dependency. So we are fooling ourselves if we think of ourselves as independent individuals who can do whatever they want. I make my decisions the way I want. No, it's never like that. We are always, like in the Ubuntu notion, we are because others are, and they make us, and we contribute in the same way. We make the others too, right? I mean, so again, I don't know if so I saw the last chat. Love is a verb, love is a doing word. Yeah, nicely written. Yes. Okay, thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I hope you like the presentation. Of course, I mean, I enjoyed the conversation as well, but Peter, communism of love, yeah. Presentazione è stata bella. Grazie, Nicolas. Grazie. Yeah.
That's an Italian in the chat.
In Italian, sì.
Nice.
Okay, grazie. But Nicolas, are you at Kingsborough as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll meet one day then. Nice. Yeah.
Well, Bruno, thank you so much for sharing so much of your personal experience, for this, what I think might be a new perspective for folks, and for all the amazing resources and books that you told us about. I think this was I found myself feeling personally affected as you were speaking, and that speaks to your conviction and the passion, and obviously the the love that you have for Pino. Thank you for sharing that with all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody. Really, thank you so much, because as I said, it was very important for me, and so it has been. It is. So I really appreciate your participation, in all senses, of course, not just being there, but the emotional as well intellectual. Yeah. So it was a pleasure. Hope to see you soon. Yeah. Okay, I think we are done. No, it's. I mean, the time is yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I just wanted to.
Yeah. Please.
Just wanted to let everybody know about our next event. which is a little bit later today. And that is going to be a conversation among students. We have a student club on campus called Students Unlimited. And they're going to be picking up on a lot of things that we talked about in this session and in our session before, you know, like what is this idea of normal, you know, this term disability and how we should or should not use it when referring to people, ideas of ableism, person first versus identity first language. And, you know, this is going to be a conversation among people with disabilities. So you will get to hear what their perspective on all of this is about. So that's going to be happening today at 4 o'clock. And I posted the registration link in the chat. So if anybody would like to attend, then go ahead and register right now.
I'll be presenting on that one if you want to see more of me.
Yep.
Yes, of course, Margot, that would be great.
Margot
Yeah.
will be there.
I'll try to be there. I have a class at Kingsbury 6:30, so I may not be able to stay the whole time, but I want to hear from you, Margot, the others as well. Karen, I know that she is here too. She
Yes,
was a student.
definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And then my last word is that tomorrow we have a couple of more events. You know, we have our featured off-campus speaker, and then we also have another student club talking about the ableism in our recreation spaces, right? In our parks, in our gyms, and how the assumption for those spaces is that they're supposed to be used by a certain type of people. So they're designed that way. When I think, you know, as you've been saying all along, Bruno, if we started to think about other types of people and made it inclusive for all, then who knows what the benefits for that would be.
Right.
So I'll also post the full agenda in the chat, so that if anyone's interested in tomorrow's events, click on that agenda. It'll take you to the full agenda on our website, and you can register for any one of the remaining sessions. So once again, thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody. Again, grazie, Nicholas. Thank you.
And please take care, everyone, and let's take Bruno's message out into the world, and you know, start caring more.
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, if I may, I mean, if you want to see the book, is in the library at Kingsborough, and Kitay's book is also at the library, available also in online format.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.